Hello, everybody. This is Jesus from PAS to PAC. I want to talk to you guys a little bit about getting into a PA school, potentially with a low GPA. This is not just talking out of what I've read, this is more of a personal experience myself. And I'm talking a little bit about how I got into PA school, what my stats were, and some recommendations I might have for you all. So, first off the bat, probably the question that I would probably get asked the most is comparing your GPA to what you see in the school curriculum, right? They have usually a student profile. It says, most of the students got this science GPA with 3.5 or 3.6, etc. You definitely want to do some research into that and see what the minimal GPA is going to be for the school that you're applying. And there's different types of GPAs too. They might do an overall GPA versus a science GPA versus non-science GPA, or your prerequisite GPAs too. So it's very important to look into all of those aspects when you're applying to a school, just to make sure that you kind of fit into that criteria. So one of the things that most people I think do is they start considering and trying to improve their GPA. But if you were in a situation like me where you've already taken a bunch of classes, it's if you notice, the more classes you take, the more you need to take, the harder it is for a single class or two or three to kind of help improve your GPA. For instance, me myself, when I graduated from the University of California, Santa Cruz during my undergraduate, I believe I graduated with a 2.89, right, which is a very low undergrad GPA. Due to personal reasons and changing my major and such, I ended up actually double majoring. Of course, I was working full time, which most of us probably did during our undergrad. So those are all kind of things that the schools usually try to take into account. But as you know, most schools, I think their minimum GPA is going to be a 3.0, which begs the question, how do you raise up your GPA? Should you repeat classes, or what do you do? What I ended up doing for my GPA is that I did end up taking classes at community college. I had some prerequisites that I kind of had to take out of the way, so those kind of helped. But I also explored different things while doing community college classes, right? So I took like nutrition classes. I think I took like intro nutrition, advanced nutrition, and then modifying diets for patients. So that was another nutrition class which had a medical emphasis. I took ethics classes, medical ethics classes, whatever you can, basically, that somehow relates to working in the medical field is be your best bet. You could always go back and try to retake classes, but just keep in mind that some schools may not accept that regrade that you have for a class. So the best thing you do may be just to explore other classes in the medical realm that might help improve your GPA. Hopefully over a 3.0. If not, then you still have a good chance of getting in. You just got to go ahead and do your research and look into schools that have a lower GPA threshold. The university that I went to, I believe their threshold was a 2.8 GPA requirement. And after taking, I think, about 20 something units, I was able to bring that 3.89 up to a 3.05. So right at the border of most PA schools, but I was still able to get a couple of interviews. And I will explain how I think I was able to conduct some of those interviews as I kind of go down the list. So the first thing you want to do, try to do if you have a low GPA, speaking from personal experience, is to try to bring up that GPA, taking classes, exploring new medical classes, and just showing that, hey, hopefully showing the review committee that you have what it takes to become a PA, by showing that the last couple of units that you took, the last 20, 30, whatever units that you took, you were able to receive A's and B's, preferably A's, but B's are also still pretty good. The other thing you want to do is volunteer, you guys. I cannot emphasize it enough. And you want to volunteer not just because you have to volunteer, but because you really want to volunteer. So find something that you're passionate about and volunteer for that. A lot of my volunteer experience came from working in my community. I did a lot of church volunteer when I was in high school, into undergrad, and not as much when I was in taking post grad, but here and there, picking up volunteer experiences, whether that's going to feed the homeless, whether that's park cleanup, being a community committee of some sort, working with high school students, whether it's first generation, um, like gear up or gearing them up to explore college, and that's a big thing that was lacking in my community, and a lot of people that I knew kind of worked in that route. Um, or working volunteer at a hospital, volunteer at a hospital, moving patients around, showing them to their room, etc. There's a lot of volunteer opportunities out there, especially now that COVID is kind of laxing. I know it's kind of picking up around this time, but there's a lot of volunteer opportunities to just open again, so take advantage of them. Find something that you really enjoy and volunteer, and try to make it consistent, something where somebody can review your application and say, you know what, this person is really dedicated to that cause, and you see them, whether it's a weekly, bi-weekly, whatever schedule volunteering. I think most schools nowadays will require some form of volunteering, but of course, you want to volunteer because you want to volunteer and be passionate about what you're volunteering in, because that will really translate into when you're having these interviews. You can talk about what you're passionate about and how you try to positively contribute to your community. Another thing I would recommend is take leadership roles, right? Whether that was before you did your medical experience or after you did your medical experience. Some of you guys might be coming straight out of undergrad and going straight to your master's program, which is good for you. I wish I would have done that, but there's a lot of students out there like myself who took not just 1 year gap year, but a couple years of a gap year to actually get some prerequisites done and get some of that medical experience needed in order to apply to these programs. So I myself, I worked in food manufacturing facilities, and I was hired as a supervisor for two different facilities, and then I transitioned into the medical field as a phlebotomist, working at a clinic, and then eventually I went to go work in a hospital, right? By having that background of being a supervisor, of taking these roles, of being leadership roles, really does help your resume. They look at this stuff, guys, not just for the medical field, but just in general, right? Because when most people are reviewing applicants, they try to look at the whole person. Especially if you have a low GPA, you want to be really gearing towards those schools whose mission is to find a diverse group of students who have a diverse background and experience, right? That should be your main goal, because those type of schools will not only just look at your GPA, but they'll take you as a person into consideration, right? They're going to take your last 30, 40 units into consideration. They're going to look at your volunteer experience, see what you're passionate about, and they're also going to look at your leadership experience and say, hey, if this person had this experiences for these certain amount of years, they must have picked up some type of skills that should be able to help them work in a team-based environment, not only in PA school, but once they're actually a practicing physician. And I just was entered my classroom a little bit early today, and I was actually there with some of the admissions committees, and these are things that I literally just heard them say today to some of the students that were already admitted. Right, these are the things that we look for in applications. So very important, you guys. Whenever you can, take leadership roles, not only because you want to have it on paper, but because it gives you the skills needed to work in a team-based environment, which is very important for school and for your career. Last thing I would say is going to be your personal statement. Very important to get that personal statement to reflect who you are, right? Not only why you want to become a PA, but also what you plan to do once you become a PA. So this is kind of where I'm kind of tying in with your volunteer experience, right? Me myself, working a lot in my community. That's something that I want to go back to. I come from a community that has a lot of migrant workers. My father, my mother immigrated from Mexico. My dad was undocumented. He was lucky enough to receive his citizenship when I was younger. And a lot of my community members lack that ability to get their citizenship, right? They still lack insurance. They work very low paying jobs, very hard jobs out in the fields. And my mission has always been to return back to my community and give back to those that population that doesn't receive adequate medical care, right? And I kind of work with based off of what I was volunteering as, you can kind of see that my volunteer work coincides with my personal statement, right? It's not just two different things. It's like, okay, this person not only is saying this is what they want to do, but they're also showing it through their actions, right? So it's very important to get that personal statement right to really show them who you are and what your goal as a PA is going to be. Whether that's to return back and work as a primary healthcare provider in your rural location, whether that's to return back as a substance abuse counselor because your community has a high rate of substance abuse. Whatever it is, you guys gotta make sure that you put that on paper so that the admissions committee can see that and see you as a whole person. So again, you definitely want to do that. So again, you want to improve your GPA, you want to volunteer, take leadership roles, and that personal statement. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think personally that I got here into the university, right? Using those four criteria that I talked about. As I said, my GPA was pretty low. It was a 2.89. Most schools require a 3.0. I did a lot of research into schools that I wanted to go to and made sure that with that GPA that I had, I was able to apply to them so I wasn't filtered out right out of the beginning. Taking those post-grad community college classes, I was able to bump up my GPA to a 3.05. I think the last semester that I took 16 units and I received a 4.0. And that was something that I talked about in my personal statement, right? This was during COVID time. So what I basically said was, my GPA wasn't the best in undergrad due to various reasons, which we all have, right? Different reasons that we might have. But please take a note that in my last 16 units that I took while working full time during the middle of the pandemic, I was able to receive a 4.0 and receive Dean's highest honors for these classes that relate to the medical field. So it's very important to kind of tailor it so that you can show your strengths in that personal statement. So definitely improving my GPA. They saw the positive trends that I had. They saw the volunteer hours that I had. I think I had in total, I think I had about 4,000 hours of volunteer hours. You don't have to have that many if you don't want to, but again, if you're passionate about something, then you will find ways to volunteer. The same way where I still plan to volunteer here as a PA S2 student. Once I get a little bit more of that didactic background, I hope to apply that and start to work around here. The school actually has a clinic for uninsured residents or uninsured people in the community, and that's something that I plan to work with in the future, right? So it's something, when you volunteer, it's something that you're very passionate about and that you hope to continue to have outside of school and once you're a practicing physician. My leadership skills that I had was, of course, working in the manufacturing facility, supervising about 40 technicians, I would say, at a time. Of course, as working in industry, I work as a quality assurance supervisor. We also basically took care of the whole facility, so about a couple hundred employees that we interacted with and have had that supervisory ability, right? And that kind of helped me build the skills of working cross department with the production team, with the R&D team, with management, food safety team, whatever it was. It gave me those skills that I could directly translate into working in a healthcare profession, which hopefully you guys are already getting some of your clinical hours in, and you have seen that a lot of the work that we will be doing, we'll be working with different departments and different people in order to make the patient better, right, healthier. So definitely take that into consideration. And then that personal statement, as I mentioned, I talked a lot about what my goals were, talked about how I got into medicine, about my background of my dad, us not having insurance when we were younger, how he was undocumented, and how I kind of made it a mission of mine to somehow give back to my community, right? But I wasn't too sure how to because there was not really in my community a path that most people took. I didn't know what a PA was until I was outside of undergrad. So I finished my undergrad degree. So it's never too late to learn about things, and you could also translate that into your essays or to your personal statements as well. Let's see here. Another thing that may help is your search, right? When you're searching for these PA schools, go to CASPA, search through there. You have to kind of go school by school by school, but kind of have a general idea as to where you want to go. If you don't have a particular area that you want to stay in, then it might be a little bit more difficult. I know there's certain search tools out there. I'll try to put a link in the description below that you can use to kind of filter out different schools based on GPA and what type of testing they may need. That's another thing, you guys, is that a lot of schools nowadays are not requiring the MCAT, the PCAT, or the GRE. So if you're concerned about those, don't worry. There's a lot of schools out there that no longer require that because there was some correlations between people getting higher scores and then being wealthier, being able to have some kind of instruction on to how to take the GRE, which is kind of a disadvantage for anybody who has a lower social economic status. That's what I did. I did not take the GRE. I did not take the what is it called? I think it was the PCAT, right? The PA one and the MCAT. I did not take any of those tests. I just looked for schools that did not require that testing anymore, and I applied specifically to those schools. Of course, keeping in mind what my GPA was, and then making sure that the mission statement aligned with what I want to do, what my mission statement is, and ensuring that they're looking at a whole person perspective. So if you're afraid that you may not get into PA school because you have a low GPA, which is I think one of the major barriers for a lot of people, there's no need to worry, you guys. Your life experiences will come in handy. Just using those four things of trying to improve your GPA, of volunteering, of taking the leadership roles, and making sure that you execute your personal statement really well. It should help you get into a PA school. And it only takes one PA school, you guys. I myself got about 4 different interviews that I went to. Ultimately, I decided to come out here. I even got into one program in my home state of California, which is a dual program for a Master's of Public Health and a PA program. It was just a little too expensive for me, about 3 years. So I decided to come out here to Chicago. But trust me, you guys, if I can do it, you can do it. And I believe in you guys. You just got to put in that work, put in the effort, the research your schools, and start your CASPA applications early, you guys. That's one thing that I would definitely recommend. That's what I did. I didn't get in the first cycle, just to let you guys know, and I don't blame anybody for that but myself. I was totally unprepared. I applied, I think, like a month before the CASPA window closed, which means that a lot of these schools already closed their application window, or if they had rolling admissions, it was already full. They were on the last seats, which means that they're very more selective as to who they're going to be choosing for these seats, right? My school only has 67 seats, but and they had about 4,000 plus applications this year, so it was less than a 2% probability that I would get in. And look at me, I'm in it. I'm in one of the top 15 PA schools in the United States, right? With a low GPA. And a lot of other factors that I overcame, which a lot of you guys have done too. So you guys can do it. Just think positively, put the work into it, put the research into it, and you will achieve your dreams. So once again, you guys, thank you guys for listening. I hope this kind of helps out a little bit, alleviate some of your concerns. And if there's anything that maybe I didn't discuss or any other tips that you might want to hear, feel free to leave a comment below, and I'll try to get back to you guys as soon as I can. Of course, I am currently in PA school, so it's not very often that I'm able to post these videos, but I am trying to help anybody out there who may need assistance with how to get into PA school with a low GPA. Thank you guys, and see you guys next time. This is Jesus from PAS to PAC. Thank you.